בשם השם נעשה ונצליח. שיעור תורה, ברוכים הבאים. We had some technical difficulties with the Facebook, so there's no Facebook Live tonight, since it's just going to take too much time for us to go forward with it, and it's just going to waste a lot of time. Instead of learning Torah, we'd rather just do it here, and B'ezrat Hashem people will just log on to BH Live or to the app. Tonight's shiur will be for Refuah Shlema for Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Rav Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Avimori David ben Asriel, Doris bat Shoah, Sarah bat Sausan, Rachel Peretz bat Chana, Miriam Bila bat Tzvia, and also for a Atzlacha Rabba for Marsha bat Julie, Ayla bat Marsha, Samuel ben Marsha, Cephas ben Marsha, Alexander ben Marsha, Louis ben Marsha, and all of Am Yisrael and all of the righteous Noahides that B'ezrat Hashem continue to listen to our shiurim, continue to learn, continue to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, of course, the Yetzer Hara is always at the door. He's always doing what he can in order to interfere with the truth, in order to interfere with us getting closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's in essence what the title of the shiur is the Satan at the door of the synagogue. There are, of course, many people out there that are aware that the Yetzer Hara is constantly trying to make them fall in different ways. We have, Baruch Hashem, the Lag BaOmer this week, which is the Lula of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who personally dealt with the Yetzer Hara in multiple ways, and of course, despite all obstacles, brought the Holy Torah's secret aspect of the Torah into the world. That is especially pertinent in our generation, especially helpful in our generation for people that are still unaware of the extraordinary nature of the Torah. Many people end up getting into or getting involved in the Torah sometimes by finding some of the mystical aspects, some of the mystical sparks that are out there as something that they want to learn more about. So of course there are different levels of Torah, there are different things that a person needs to learn. But our issue with the is not necessarily the secret part of the Torah, but rather what the Chazon Ish in this series of the Jewish HaShkafa trying to explain to us that it doesn't really matter where a person is in his level, whether he's a new Baal Tshuva, he's a convert, he's a rabbi, he's an avrech. There's a very important lesson that the sages teach us, that we have to obviously know where our place is. When we compare ourselves to the sages, to the Gdolei Ador, not just the ones that lived at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu or the time of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, but rather the Chachamim that live in your generation. There's a reason why the first Mishnah in Masechet Avot talks about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah to Moshe. Moshe gave it to Yeshua, Yeshua to the Skenim, Skenim to Nevi'im, and the interesting question that a person should have is, wait a minute, if Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe, Moshe gave it to Yeshua, Yeshua to the Skenim, why didn't they mention all the Skenim? I mean, there's not necessarily that many of them, and 70 elders. This is important people. Why shouldn't we know their name? So Chachamim teach us that it's so you don't think that perhaps the Gdolim, the Chachamim in your generation couldn't have been at as great as the Chachamim at Mount Sinai, because it's very easy for a person to say, listen, if Moshe Rabbeinu himself told me to keep Shabbat or to not do this or not to do that, then I'd listen. But it's just you, or it's just the rabbis of this generation, or it's the rabbis of the previous generation saying it. Who is to say that they truly understand the Torah? Now, the beautiful thing is that the Torah already prepared for this, that there is Moshe Rabbeinu, of course everyone knows, even the Goyim know who he was, Yeshua ben Nun, everyone knows, but there's also the Skenim, these elders. These elders were intentionally unnamed, so you never think, oh wait a minute, maybe they were great as Moshe Rabbeinu, maybe less, but the point is that they're unnamed. Why they're unnamed? Because it could very well be that the elder that you have in your community, the rabbi that you have in your community, surely could fit as one of those elders if he obviously has Da'at Torah. But many times today, people get confused and they think that maybe they could paskin for themselves if they learn a few books on their own, if they watch a few YouTube videos, and they could just simply ignore the obligation that we have to have a rabbi and simply become their own rabbi. And the Chazon Ish, of course, is warning us about this issue time and time again over the last several shiurim about the importance of actually having a rabbi, but not only that, but the importance of actually knowing where you stand in comparison to the people that have dedicated their life to the Torah, that have become the beholders of the crown of Torah. The Mishnah in Avot says that there is the crown of the king, there's the crown of the keuna, and there's the crown of the Torah. Which one is the biggest? Now you would think, the crown of the king. Yeah, he's the king. Hashem selected him. He's the king. But that's not true. The crown of the king is not the biggest, because it doesn't require anything for a person to acquire it. He just has to be born into the right lineage, and he would become king. What about the crown of keuna? Same exact thing. He doesn't have to do anything in order to have the crown of keuna. He's just born a kohen. If his father's a kohen, he's a kohen. As long as his father is a kosher Jew and is not married to a woman that he's forbidden from marrying, he can be a kohen, and even a kohen gadol. But the crown of Torah is the greatest because that's something that a person can acquire, and anybody can acquire it. Anyone can acquire it. The problem today is that people don't really understand the difference between a crown of Torah versus a little bit of basic knowledge that a person has that they acquired on a few books, maybe a few YouTube videos, and many times people simply watch so many videos and read certain amount of books, and they simply think, since they know more than the average folk, that makes them wise, and even wise enough to even compete and debate the greatest sages of all time and even disagree with them. So, of course, it's important for a person to know that in order for you to say the words that come out of your mouth, to be truthful, you yourself have to be honest. You have to be honest with yourself. Rav Shvadron alav shalom used to always say on himself, at least I'm a kosher vessel. At least I'm a kosher vessel. Of course, he was the kosher of kosher badat. So he's the Kodesh Kodeshim, was an extraordinary speaker, but even more so an extraordinary Talmid Chacham. He was the grandson of the Maharal, someone that dedicated his life to learning Torah and took on himself above and beyond what the norm is. His own Midat Chasidut was extraordinary, of how he would, during the time before the high holidays, he would take a Tani Dibur for the entire 40 days. So literally not talking about anything other than Torah. So people today, if you tell them to do Tani Dibur for an hour or two, they already think it's a big deal. So we see here, someone that knows is calling himself, at least I'm a kosher vessel. And he used to say a story that the Rav Mibrisk, who had to fight tooth and nail against the Maskilim, against the Enlighteners, the Reform movement, and all of these Zionists, all of the people that tried to distort the Torah with their own wisdom, that unfortunately fooled many people, similar to how so-called philosophers that have the title of rabbi fool people today. And one of these maskilim came to the community and asked the Rabbi Brisk if he could speak in his community. And the Rav said, no, absolutely not. You cannot speak in my community. You can't speak in my synagogue. No, but for the Rav, don't worry. If you're worried that I'm going to mention the sources from our books or from our philosophies, you don't have to worry. The only thing that I'm going to bring is sources from the Torah, from the Abarbanel, from the Rambam. That's the only thing I'm going to mention in my lecture. I'm only going to talk Divrei Torah about the weekly parasha. That's all I'm going to do. Just read it. I'm only going to read what it says. I'm going to bring what sources. And the Rabbi Brisk again looked at them with a straight face and says, no, absolutely not. You cannot speak in my synagogue. You cannot speak in my community. But why? If I'm only mentioning Torah, if I'm only mentioning the kosher sources, what's the problem of me speaking? He says, because even if you take a kosher piece of meat, and you cook it, but the vessel is not kosher, then that kosher piece of meat turns into treif. You are the problem, not the sources. You are not a kosher person. You don't have Yirat Shamayim. And therefore, whatever comes out of your mouth is something that no Jew should ever hear. No human should ever hear. So a person has to make sure that they themselves are a kosher vessel. Once you become a kosher vessel, then the words that will come out of your mouth will typically become more likely to be kosher. But of course, in order for us to be kosher vessels, we have to ensure that we know where we stand. When it comes to real Talmidei Chachamim that have dedicated their lives to Torah, have dedicated their lives to Avodat Hashem, and many times people don't really know how to appreciate the Talmidei Chachamim, the scholars. When I tell people that we have these holy tzaddikim learning in our kollel, and the average person doesn't truly understand what that means. Some of my students, Baruch Hashem, have gone over there and have met some of these avrechim and have met Rav Ephraim, and each and every single one of them has always told me that it was like a Mount Sinai for them, an enlightening experience, something they could have never thought. Just meeting another human being that has, flesh and blood. It's not someone that has the light of the sun coming out of his face like Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a person that is flesh and blood, but you clearly understand that there's a difference here, a very, very big difference, both spiritually and otherwise. A person that meets a real Talmid Chacham knows the difference. But unfortunately today, one of the negative prophecies that the Gemara in Masechet Sotah that's being fulfilled right now is the bizayon of Talmidei Chachamim, the desecration of Torah scholars already has been happening for the last several hundred years, and it just continues to increase. So the average person, when they say something against a rabbi that's a big rabbi, against a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, they don't think don't think about it twice. They don't think too much of it. They simply think, oh, he's a person, I'm a person. He puts his pants on one leg at a time. I do too. He reads books, I read books. So what if I said he's wrong and he doesn't know what he's talking about? What's the big deal? Well, Rabotai Karim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the Chachamim that on his kavod, on his honor, he's willing to forgive, but not on the kavod of his scholars. Meaning that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is more stringent when it comes to the honor of his scholars than he is on the honor of himself. So much so that I saw with my own eyes. I saw with my own eyes one guy that was a rabbi, Talmid Chacham, knew a few things, Baruch Hashem, and one day somebody came to him and asked him his opinion about another Talmid Chacham, another person that dedicated his life to Torah. And he decided to say to this young man that didn't know right or left, but looked religious, he decided to say to him, don't listen to him, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Surely this caused a lot of problems. Of course, that second Talmid Chacham that was mocked lost a few students, lost some money. But what did these other people lose? Well, that person had said, don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Not a month passed by that he got a stroke, and the only part of his body that couldn't operate is his mouth. Now, of course, the average person will say, maybe it's incidental, maybe it's coincidental. You can say whatever you want to say. When you see something with your own eyes, it's very, very different than when you hear about it as a story. Now, the beautiful thing about the Chazon Ish is that he himself had an extraordinary amount of kavod for Talmidei Chachamim as well as for everybody else. But the honor that he had for Torah scholars was above and beyond what people think is normal. Because today, the average person thinks that, if I go attend a shiur, if I donate a few dollars, if I say Chazak u'Baruch, if I call him Kvod Harav, that's kavod for the Chacham, right? That's good. I'm doing good, no? Well, yes, that is good, but let's just see if the honor that the Chazon Ish gave, Chazon Ish that had himself a palace full of Torah, what kind of honor did he give to Torah scholars? And this is in preparation of understanding what he's saying next here in the Sefer, in our series of Jewish HaShkafa, based on the Sefer Emunah V'Bitachon. The Chazon Ish, when he was already in his 70s, older man, weak, had people come to see him on a regular basis, and one time, one of the Gdolim of the generation, the Ger Rebbe, came to visit the Chazon Ish. After they discussed some Torah matters, the Chazon Ish, despite being older, despite being weaker, walked the Ger Rebbe to the door, and then out the door to walk him towards the taxi that was waiting for him. Walked the younger Ger Rebbe all the way to the taxi, and as soon as they got to the taxi, the Ger Rebbe couldn't deal with the fact that the Chazon Ish is going to walk all the way from the taxi back to the house on this dirt road. No, I'm walking with you. And he took him back all the way to the door. And the Chazon Ish, they continued talking, but then realized, wait, the taxi's over there. Like, no way that my guest, this Torah scholar, is going to walk by himself. And he walks him back, all the way back to the taxi. And people are watching this. These two tzaddikim are walking each other back and forth from the house to the taxi to the house to the taxi on this dirt road, and the Chazon Ish is an older man. And the Ger Rebbe doesn't feel comfortable leaving him over there to walk by himself, and he doesn't feel comfortable to leave him back himself. Literally, dozens of times they keep going back and forth. The taxi doesn't care. He has two tzaddikim, and has an extraordinary lesson of what a Talmid Chacham is, simply by watching this. And back and forth they go until the Ger Rebbe realized, I have to do something about this. He gets the Chazon Ish back to the house, he closes the door quickly, and he runs to the taxi before the Chazon Ish has a chance to come outside and walk him back to the taxi. Such was the honor that the Chazon Ish had for the Ger Rebbe, for a Torah scholar, and vice versa, of course. But even if a person thinks, maybe this is something that he gave someone that's already well known around the whole world, and therefore that's what he did. Well, there was one time when, during Sukkot, the last year before the Chazon Ish went to Gan Eden, he was in his sukkah by himself, and Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, that wrote the Baal Michtav Eliyahu, the famous Sefer, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler was still younger at the time, came into the Chazon Ish's sukkah, and immediately he saw that the Chazon Ish standing up. Now, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler was not known around the world yet as what he became later on in his life. So he had no idea who the Chazon Ish, the Gedol Hador, is standing for, so he looked behind him. Like, what Torah scholar came in? Maybe an angel came in, maybe Moshe Rabbeinu came in. Why is he standing? He only found out why he's standing after he looked back and he saw that there's nobody there, realizing that the Gedol Hador is standing for him. Why? He has Torah in him. So when a person understands how much those that actually possess Torah, those that have acquired Torah, honor others that have acquired Torah, perhaps they can understand that it's not just reading some books. The reason why one Torah scholar honors another Torah scholar is because they know how much sacrifice a person truly has to make in order to truly acquire Torah. It's not just reading books. It's not just sitting at a desk or standing and taking your time. It's a whole life structure that a person has to set up in such a fashion that if a person would only watch it, they would simply be motivated to learn Torah just by watching it. This is why sometimes it's good to see the videos of any Chacham, or to listen to them learning, or to read their books and see what took place in their life, because you literally see how different they are from the rest of mankind. Now, the Chazon Ish has warned us time and time again over the last several shurim to make sure that we realize that when it comes to not only the Talmidei Chachamim, but especially those that are up the upper echelon, the ones that are Dayanim, the ones that have already become judicial judges, the ones that already have become even Gedolei Hador, never for a moment think that this Dayan is of the same mindset as you. Because the moment you start thinking that this Chacham has the same mindset as you, he's no longer a Chacham. In fact, he's even less than you are. And typically what people do is that they accuse the Chachamim of things that they themselves are guilty of. Either they're guilty of doing it currently, or they're guilty of thinking that if they had the opportunity to do it, they would do it. So the Chazon Ish warned us time and time again to never judge the Chachamim, needless to say the Dayanim, in the same fashion that we judge ourselves or other people, and think that just because we would do something because we have a bias, they would do something because they have a bias, and surely our biases our personal agenda is the same. And the Chazon Ish says this is the furthest thing from the truth, so much so that it can lead a person to become considered an apikolos, a heretic. Now today he's going to give us the next part of this example so we can understand it, of how he told us last week that they think differently, these chachamim, they look at things differently, but when a person does not see the chachamim as anything different than him or herself, they could easily get to a point where they would actually be so convinced that there's no difference between them and them, that they would even create a sophisticated argument to justify their case of why this chacham is really not such a big deal. In fact, why this chacham is biased and has his personal agenda in mind and not necessarily the interest of others. This was, Rabotai, something that wasn't invented in recent generations, but rather something that even Korach did, despite the fact that Korach knew a lot of Torah. Now, the Chazon Ish says that when a person says that, yes, he's a good rabbi, he speaks well, he writes well, everything is good, but he only does it for the money, right? But he only does it because he's famous. But he has this personal agenda. But this, but that. The second that they put some type of stigma, some type of addition to all of those compliments they give that rabbi, that chacham, that makes that chacham, in the eyes of people, worse than everybody else. Not only is he no longer a chacham, he's actually below everybody else. Because now, even the good that you highlighted about him has some type of agenda tied to it. And the Chazon Ish says that this is like taking the barrel that's full of wine, pouring the wine that you've complimented how great this wine is. This is the amazing wine. You've taken the wine that's so expensive. You've taken the wine that you've complimented as a old and good wine. You poured it out and you kept the barrel and thinking that you did the right thing. And now he continues and he says, let us give an example so that the matter will be firmly established in the heart of the reader. When people are in a process of electing a rabbi or a leader, each one finds fault with the other's candidate. It will be right for them to trust the decision of the Torah leaders of the generation. And if the decision of one of these leaders is not enough to settle the issue because of the obstinacy of the unlearned, one can say that the intentional sins of the unlearned are like non-intentional ones. They recognize their sin, but they're not used to subjecting their will to the dictates of intellect. So here in the first part, the Chazon Ish tells us of something that happens in countless communities around the world, where the time has come for the community to elect a new rabbi. Either the rabbi that they had has passed on, moved on, or simply they want some new inspiration. Now, of course, everyone has an opinion when it comes to who's going to be the rabbi that's going to lead the community. Even the guy that only comes to synagogue once or twice a year, he has an opinion. As long as he has a few $100 bills or a few $1,000s that he donates to the community, he thinks that his opinion is just as valid as the people that go and actually enjoy and become part of the synagogue on a daily basis. Everyone has an opinion. And if that's not bad enough, that people that really are not qualified and should not have an opinion, they also make sure that when they see that your opinion is different than theirs, they start mocking your opinion. No, come on, you're going to bring him. No, he's too much. He's ancient. He's too this. He's too that. And everybody cancels out each other's candidates. Everybody cancels out. He wants Rabbi A, and the other guy wants Rabbi B, and the other one wants Rabbi C, and they start arguing about it. And they're not arguing in a good way, but rather they're arguing about how Rabbi A is better because Rabbi B and C are biased or this or that. Now, the Chazon Ish says that this is a typical argument that happens in many communities, and in fact, this is a very big problem. Why? Because the Gemara in Masechet Yevamot page 13b, says the mitzvah of lotit godedu, that is initially stated as Kadosh Baruch Hu telling us not to defile the dead by carving or cutting their bodies and so on. But the Gemara says there's also an additional lesson. Lotit godedu, the Chachamim learn from there, don't build new agudot, meaning don't create new, don't cut up the community into pieces. Don't create different teams where you want one rabbi, he wants another rabbi, he wants another rabbi, and what do you end up happening? Okay, you know what? You don't agree with the same rabbi that I want, I'm going to open a second shul. You don't agree with my rabbi, I'm going to open a competing this and competing that. Don't do that. Why? Because once you start thinking, oh, if you don't agree with the same rabbi, you might as well open something else, this is what creates a lot of debates that are unnecessary, a lot of sinat chinam. And the reality is that the bigger the synagogue, the more Torah it's going to be in it. The more Torah it's going to be in it. But many times when people don't get their way because they feel like their choice was the best, what ends up happening is a bunch of small places that barely can get a minyan. So it's a problem, but typically this problem, the Chazon Ish says, is a problem of ignorant people that don't really know much Torah, and they simply insult each other until somebody comes up with the idea, you know what, let's ask one of the big chachamim, let's ask one of the Gdolei Hador what they think. What they think. In the beginning, everyone thinks they're going to win the bet, the race. He thinks Rabbi A is going to win because he's clearly the Gdolei Hador is going to identify that my rabbi is the best. The second guy thinks, the Gdolei Hador, of course, is going to see that the two choices these other people made is a terrible choice, and clearly the rabbi that I chose, he's younger, he's clever, he's better, he's going to be the one. And the third one says, these guys don't know what they're talking about. Clearly the Gdolei Hador is going to choose my rabbi, he's the elder, he's already been around, and we're lucky to have him. So they send the sheila, they send the question to one of the Gedolim, one of the big rabbis of the generation, who responds accordingly and sends them the tshuva. Chazon Ish says, of course, what ends up happening? At least 2 out of the 3 choices are unhappy. Why? Because the Gdolei Hador didn't pick their rabbi, didn't pick the one that they chose. So what do? Typically they say, listen, I understand that he said that your rabbi is the one and not the rabbi that I chose and not the rabbi that he chose. But to be honest with you, I don't think the Gdolei Hador knows what he's, I don't think he knows our community well enough to really make that choice. I think we made a mistake to send the question. I think we really need to rethink it. Now this is not only not listening to what the community wants, but rather not listening to the Gdolei Hador. This is horrible. But Chazon Ish says, it's not good, but it's not a surprise. Why? These people are ignoramuses. These people don't learn Torah. They don't know what the opinion of a Torah scholar is. They don't know when he says something, a Kadosh Baruch Hu fulfills it. They have no concept because they have never surrendered themselves to intellect to begin with in order to know what intellect is. Meaning they've never surrendered their desires in order to acquire more wisdom, in order to acquire more Torah. Because they're busy working, chasing money, chasing their desires. They show up to the community here and there, just eat maybe a few burekas, listen to a lecture, but as soon as it gets to a serious learning, they run away as far as possible to the places where they feel is going to give them more physical joy. They're not looking to develop their wisdom, and therefore they don't know what wisdom is, even if it hit them in the face. So that's why these poor people, Chazon Ish says, since they're not wise, they're intentional sins. They know it's wrong what they're doing, but it's considered as if it's like an accident. Why? Because it's already their nature to make decisions that way based on their own opinion. They're not used to listening to a Talmid Chacham. So this is not a surprise. Even in Shamayim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not surprised about them not listening to Chachamim. But he says, but you know what's worse? You know what's worse than these people? You know what's worse? What's worse? Sometimes, those who see themselves as being possessed of honesty and good qualities, and their pride they believe that they are ruled by the good inclination, and their judgment are based on solid information. And if they have discussed the issue seriously and leisurely, present sophisticated opinion, that one should not take the opinion of the leader into consideration. Obviously, they say, he is no greater than Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, or Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Elisha, and that he has vested interest in the issue. He wants this rabbi to get the position because of 3 dots. He says sometimes there's something much worse than these ignoramuses arguing, and even when they get the opinion of the Torah scholars, they don't listen anyway. Sometimes this same type of debate about who's going to be the rabbi is between people that consider themselves as those that are ruled by the good inclination. The Gemara says, who's controlled by the good inclination? Torah scholars, people that learn Torah. Meaning these people are not just religious, these people actually learn Torah on a regular basis. These people learn Torah on a regular basis. They're not fools. They're not ignoramuses. They know a few things. So much so that they are considered those that are ruled by the good inclination, or at least they think. And they have the same type of argument of who's going to be the rabbi. He says Rabbi A, he says Rabbi B, and the other guy says Rabbi C. And each one has presented his case of why Rabbi A is the most fit. He's the biggest scholar. He wrote the most books. The second guy says, yes, but maybe he wrote more books. My guy, my rabbi, he's one of the Gedolei Ador. He just don't know about it because he's so busy giving lectures. So he wrote less books, but he's still a Gedolei Ador. And the third guy says, yeah, you guys are great. He wrote books. He gives lectures. My guy's a Mekubal. One time they asked him, where is this missing child? He told them right off the bat, that's where he is. Meaning the 3 rabbis that they're selecting, they're all good. But the 3 people, or 3 parties arguing in the community, don't agree on which one is the best one. Now what ends up happening, each presents a sophisticated opinion that one should not take the opinion of the leader into consideration. They go to the Gedolei Ador, they ask the Gedolei Ador, which one of us is right? Rabbi A wrote a lot of books, he's good. Rabbi B, he wrote some books, but he's a very famous lecturer. Rabbi C is a Mekubal, he's amazing, knows a few things, mystical stuff. Which one should be the rabbi of our community? The Gadol reviews the matter, reviews which Keilah we're talking about. We're in Bnei Brak, we're in Yerushalayim, we're in Muncie, we're in Lakewood, we're in Florida, wherever we are. He decides Rabbi XYZ is the most appropriate out of the choices that you chose, and he sends them the answer. They get the answer, same outcome. 2 out of the 3 parties are unhappy with the outcome. Why? It's not what they chose. So what do? Instead of accepting, now they're Torah scholars, or at least they think they are. They're religious, they know a few things, they read the Midrash, they read Gemara, perhaps even finished the Shas. They know a few things. Gedolei Ador send them the answer. They not only reject it, similar to the ignoramuses, but worse yet, they present a sophisticated opinion of why you shouldn't take the opinion of this Gadol into consideration. You know, this big rabbi, Yeshivas, listen, with all due respect, I know he's the biggest rabbi over there, but what does he really know about our community? What does he really know? And even, he knows about the community. Oh, why does he know? Because his sister, her son is married to this one. And they start developing all types of arguments of why, he may know, but that knowledge is actually a weight against him. Why? Because that knowledge creates a bias. And of course we learn from Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Elisha. He's not greater than them. Even they were great Dayanim mentioned in the Gemara, and they recused themselves from being the judges because they knew that they had a self-interest, they had a bias of some kind. So surely he has a bias. So I'm not saying he's a bad guy. He's a Gadol, he's a tzaddik, he's everything, but he's not greater than these, Tanaim, Amoraim. He's not greater than them, right? He's not. So he also has a bias. That's all I'm saying. He has a bias too. So what he told us to pick the rabbi C that happens to be not the one that I chose, I don't think it's really kosher like it's supposed to be. I think that opinion has a little bit of bias in it, a little vested interest in it. Now what happens, Rabotai, when they put this tzara, this poison, on top of the name of this gadol? They say that he wants this rabbi to get the position because this rabbi is his sister's son. This rabbi, he's also Sephardi and he's Sephardi, but not just Sephardi, he's Iraqi and he's Iraqi, he's Tripotai and he's Tripotai, he's from Turkey and he's from Turkey. They create all types of convoluted arguments, and 300 years ago, the families married together, and of course this creates some type of connection between them, and they'll create a very sophisticated argument of why this gadol's opinion should not be listened to, because it's biased. This is exactly what Korach did. Up to now, it's exactly what Korach did. Why? Korach, the Gemara says, Korach was a fool? No, Korach was Baal Ruach HaKodesh. Korach got to a level of having Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh, Rabotai, is not something you get from the street or from the deli. Ruach HaKodesh, Korach was a very bright person. Also got 250 of the biggest rabbis that were not Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron HaKohen, Yeshua ben Nun, Betzalel, Caleb ben Yefuneh, and Pinchas, and Nachshon ben Aminadab. Pretty much everybody else, he got to join him. Korach was a very smart person. But Korach, in his Ruach HaKodesh, the Midrash says, Parashat Korach, Korach saw the Ruach HaKodesh that Shmuel the Navi will come from him. Shmuel will come from him, and the Gemara says Shmuel is like Moshe and Aaron. So he figured, if Shmuel is going to come from my seed, surely my thoughts that I'm right and Moshe Rabbeinu is wrong, surely I'm right, even more so. So how could it be that I'm right, Moshe Rabbeinu is wrong? Because Moshe, although he did good things, he has a bias, he has an agenda. Because look, all of the korbanot, where are they going? They're going to his brother. His brother, they're going to Aaron HaKohen. The Maaser goes to him. The other Maaser goes to the Kohen, goes to him. Constantly, everything is to him, to his brother, to him, to his brother. So really, Moshe only is telling us all of these rules in the name of Hashem, not because Hashem said it, but rather because he has a vested interest. So Korach, with all of his brilliance, who saw that Shmuel is coming from him, and then because of that little bit of knowledge that Hashem gave him, took it in the wrong fashion and manipulated an entire argument that therefore that means that everything he says is right. It's like somebody getting a good chidush. A good chidush, and after he gets a good chidush that's valid, that people even compliment him about, he thinks he's a Talmid Chacham, and he can tell the rabbi, and he can tell those scholars what to do from now on. Or best yet, the guy just did Shuvah 2 years ago, and when he prays Shmoneh Esrei, he takes 25 minutes to pray. And he sees that the community that's been going to synagogue for 30 years, before he was even born, they're taking 6-7 minutes. Starts looking at them with frowning upon them. These people don't know how to pray. I should leave this community. 25 minutes I spent praying. He doesn't realize that the only reason why he's praying 25 minutes is because he's not comfortable with the words yet. It's not because he has more kavanah than them. Rav Ovadia prayed also in a few minutes. So a person has to understand that sometimes, just because something looks one way doesn't necessarily mean that it is. But unfortunately, even people that are chachamim, like Korach, made such a mistake that one good thing that they did, or one good thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them, made them conclude that everything is kosher. And therefore anyone that is against them, he must be not kosher. Oh, you disagree with me? You must be a criminal. You must be a heretic. You must be enemy of the state. And they literally look for enemies. Instead of looking for friends, they look for enemies. And unfortunately, this is one of the things that happens. And it's not one of those things that is a pleasant thing to deal with. But nonetheless, it's something that is a part of life. It's a part of getting closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're going to see this in different communities. You're going to see this with different places, different keilot. Now, of course, Korach thought that he was right, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him not only that he's wrong, but him and all of his followers are still inside Gehenom. 3,333 years later, screaming, Moshe is emet, his Torah is emet, and we are liars. And one of the Gemara says that one of the Chachamim was shown exactly the place by an Arab that lived by there, where once a month the screaming comes out of the ground. He says, how do you know the exact timing? He says, once a month, every day, same month. I'm living here for generations already, every year, every month, same exact time, we hear this. That's your Korach. He says, why once a month? He says, because once a month, they cook them, and the cook turns in such a fashion where he is facing closer to the entrance, and he's screaming. That's how Korach and all of his followers are being cooked in Gehenom for 3,333 years later, which has nafkamina. There's a nafkamina for this Gemara. What's the nafkamina? Why does the Kadosh Baruch Hu need us to know that Korach is screaming until this date, 3,333 years later, and you could hear him scream at a certain place in the desert? What's the point of the story? The point is against all of the heretics that tell you that the maximum sentence in Gehenom is 12 months. How could it be 12 months maximum if Korach and everyone that followed him is still in Gehenom to this day? What? They're the only ones that are there? Everybody else is more righteous than them. So a person, obviously, when he understands that the Torah is there, every story, every single page, every single line has a purpose behind it, and this is just one of many purposes to that story. But needless to say, Korach thought he was right. His followers thought they were right. The Midrash says that Bnei Korach lo metu. The sons of Korach didn't die. So this has a couple of meanings. The first meaning is that the sons of Korach didn't die because last minute, the Midrash says, last minute they realized their father is wrong and they went to Moshe Rabbeinu's side. And this meant a lot. Why? Because that means you're going against Moshe Rabbeinu. They don't know that the ground is about to open and swallow Korach and everybody that's following him. They just know that there is a showdown between Korach and their father. Their father is the richest man of the land. That means they're going with his enemy. They're going to be excluded from any inheritance, excluded from any family gathering, lose everything that they have. What are they giving up everything for? To stand with Moshe Rabbeinu, the enemy of their father. Of course, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu opened the ground, everyone came down, including the sons of Korach, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a miracle that a piece of the wall came out to save the sons of Korach, and he then lifted them back up above the ground with everybody else. So the Midrash says that's what it means, that Bnei Korach lo metu, that the sons of Korach didn't die, meaning that everyone thought initially they're going to die because maybe it was too late for them to do tshuva, but no, Hashem saved them miraculously. But there is another meaning, the Midrash says. What's the other meaning that the sons of Korach didn't die? That there's always descendants of Korach that like to create machloket, that like to create arguments that are not for the sake of heaven, that are against the Torah for their own name, to build their own name, to build their own reputation. A rabbi says, listen, you should start becoming more modest, you should start keeping Shabbat, start learning Torah. You bring this to some local rabbi and say, he's too stringent. You shouldn't listen to him. Maybe it's because he's Sephardi. Maybe because he's this. Maybe because he's that. This is something that creates machloket. Why? Because now all of a sudden, the person that brought this to the rabbi told him, listen, I heard this, words of the living God, truth from this rabbi. He said such and such. Maybe we need to work on our community to fix some things. No, don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's this, he's that. So what is that? So that guy that heard this from his rabbi, he has to conclude either his rabbi is a liar, or the other guy really, he's part of a cult. Or he's, I shouldn't like all Sephardis, or I shouldn't like all Baalei Tshuva, or I shouldn't like this, or I shouldn't like that. Creates a machloket, creates problems. The person needs to know that Bnei Korach lo metu. There are always wicked people that are born in every generation that will create all types of issues, not for the sake of heaven, but rather for the sake of their own name. Just like the people of the Tower of Babel that wanted to build a building, to build themselves a name. Says Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, there are people in every generation, especially the generation that he's alive in and thereafter, meaning our generation, that are building yeshivot, that are building kollels and building synagogues, not for the sake of heaven, says Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, but rather to building these places for their own name. They want to tell people, yeah, you know yeshiva, I built a yeshiva. Yeah. You know that synagogue? Who do you think did it? Do I have to say? Do I have to say who did it? Do I have to say? And this is how they are. They build it, but they build it for themselves. They build it for their own name, for their own reputation. Yeshivot like this, like the Tower of Babel. No one needs this. There's nothing good's going to come out of such a place. But of course, Rabotai Ikalim, the issues that we have as a nation are not issues that are just because of the secular people and the ignoramuses. Even more so, we have issues among us religious people that have unfortunately have failed time and time again in these teachings. When they hear something that doesn't agree with their predisposition. Years ago, there was a huge machloket, literally an outright war, between the Yavits and Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz. Both tzaddikim, kedoshim. The Yavits saw a couple of kamelt that Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz made and was certain that Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz, chas v'shalom, was continuing the teachings of Shabtai Tzvi, Yimach Shimo, one of the false messiahs that caused a lot of damage to Am Yisrael. Now, the Yavitz was Gdol Hador. Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz was Gdol Hador. But the Yavitz said and wrote horrible things against Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz because according to him, according to his investigation, the Yavitz was doing something terrible. He even called him a mean, a pikolus, all types of horrible things that if it wasn't written, we wouldn't be allowed to say it. And there was a war. What made it worse? That some of the little foxes that call themselves the Talmidim of both rabbis, they incited it even more. They made it even worse. They made things much, much worse. Years later, there was one of the Chachamim, one of the Gdolim, that dealt with Gilgulim, reincarnations, Dibukim, all types of things of the other side, Rabbi Shlomkin Mizvil. He was an Admor, Ish Kadosh, and the Talmidim of Rabbi Shlomkin Mizvil noticed that he has literally endless amount of cats in his yard. And no matter how many times they shooed them away, they kept coming back, these cats. And they came to the Rabbi Shlomkin, please, we have to do something. Maybe we need to get somebody, a professional service, to get these cats away. He says, no, chas v'shalom, we don't need to get rid of these cats. Why do you need all these cats? It's not that I need these cats, but they need to be here. Why? He says, these cats, each and every single one of these cats, they're the reincarnation of the students of the machloket between the Yavitz and Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz. All of those little foxes that made things much worse than what they needed to be, that thought that their rabbi not only is right, but the other rabbi is wicked, rasha, and so on. They thought that their opinion counts. They thought that they're allowed to put their hat and their 2 cents into the argument of two giants. When the two giants are arguing, surely right now when they're both in Gan Eden, there is peace among them. That the Yavit sees, the Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz, although he used certain things that look like what Shabtai Tzvi was doing, surely he was not doing what Shabtai Tzvi did. Shabtai Tzvi was a Rasha Mavusha. But now, he couldn't see it when he was in this world. But surely there's peace among them in Shemayim. They see there's peace among them. But these Reshaim, these young people, they weren't looking for the truth. They were looking to be right. Those other people, those Talmidim, they just want to tell everybody, your rabbi is wicked, your rabbi is a heretic, you're a Rasha also, you're an idol worshiper, and all they were looking for is to make fun of people. They weren't looking to help. They weren't looking for the truth. They were just looking to make fun of people. They were just looking to be right. Be part of the winning team. They had to reincarnate. They had to get punished. The rabbis on Gan Eden, their real Talmidim that kept quiet and just stuck with their rabbi. Okay, rabbi, don't go over there anymore. No problem, I'll stay with you. I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to put my 2 cents into it. You're saying no good? Okay, I stay over here. I learn Torah, I do mitzvah, I do everything. I don't need to put my 2 cents into everything. I don't need to put my 2 cents in everything. Same thing with the other Talmidim. Rabbi, you say that he's wrong? Okay, no problem. We listen to you. You learn. You teach us every day. We don't need to put out 2 cents into everything. So some, the real Talmidim that are focused on learning Torah from their rabbi weren't part of this argument between the Yavits and Rabbi Yotam Abishitz. They weren't part of it. Who was the ones that was part of it that caused the mess? The ones that were pretending to go to the Beit Midrash. They would come, hang out, like those people, they come, they hang out, they sit down, they pretend like they're learning. They open a book. Amar Abaye. No, so what time is it? When's lunch? Okay. Amar Abaye. What are you eating? Oh, chicken? Okay. Amar Abaye. I don't want chicken today. You sure chicken? Maybe we should get Chinese. Okay, fine. Amar Abaye. 75 times. They never get to actually learning. 12 o'clock comes, he goes, wow, I'm beat. I learned so much. What'd you learn? It's a lot to learn. You want to get lunch? You told me chicken, right? Okay, let's get lunch. And all day they waste time. All day they just waste time. But they pretend like they're real Talmidim. They pretend, but as soon as there's a debate, all of a sudden they're the first to protest in the street, throw bottles, throw rocks, make noise. Those people, they turn into cats. Why? Because they weren't looking for the truth. They were treating the rabbi like it's a sports team, Hashem Yishmor. They wanted to be part of the winning team, the championship team. You want to be a championship team? You'll be a championship team of cats. That's what happens. Why? We're here to learn. We're not here to cause fights for no reason. If your rabbi says something, no problem. You can say, you could, as long as you focus on what the rabbi said and focus on learning Torah, and if you, let's say, for example, you're there to warn people, no problem. But don't turn it into a thing. Don't turn it as that this is the only thing that you're involved in. You're only involved in telling everybody else that they're bad, telling the other people that they're terrible, especially if the other side is not necessarily truly wicked people. So again, it's a very, very complicated issue. And anytime a person is going to, let's say, for example, share a book or a shiur that we did or somebody else did that is exposing somebody else, it's best to leave it as is. Meaning, share it as is. Don't add your 2 cents to it. Don't add a picture to it. Don't add what your description of it is. Don't call people names because they don't want to listen. Simply share it. This is what it is. This is the opinion you want to hear. You don't want to hear it, that's fine. But once a person starts making a thing out of it, then they can put themselves into harm. Why? Because then it can start creating animosity between you and another person rather than you trying to help another person. And it's important for a person to know that there were debates throughout all of the generations. Whether it was the debate between Cain and Abel, that led to actual murder, or it's Korach against Moshe Rabbeinu, the Tan v'Aviram against Moshe Rabbeinu, or it's all of the enemies of David HaMelech. There have been debates throughout all of the generations. But once these Chachamim, once these tzaddikim get up to Shamayim, if they're really tzaddikim, there's no debates over there. If they're Reshaim, they don't go up to Shamayim, they stay in Gehenom. Korach is still in Gehenom. But if you're talking about the tzaddikim, if you're talking about Shaul and David HaMelech, they were both tzaddikim, they both went up to Gan Eden. In fact, Rabotai, it's an extraordinary story. An extraordinary story of what a Chacham really is when the Chazon Ish says that Chacham he looks like a human being, but he's really an angel among men. One of the stories that puts that into the greatest perspective that I know of is a story of the Maharal. The Maharal, anyone that learns Gemara knows, I've seen the name Maharal. Why? There's not a page in the Gemara where you see the commentary not mention the Maharal. Every daf. You cannot understand a page of Gemara without Maharal. Now the Maharal wasn't known from birth as this prodigy. In fact, this Maharal was unknown for years. And not only unknown, people used to think he was a crazy person, and they used to call him Shmulik. Shmulik, the crazy person, the shoter, used to intentionally dress in a certain way and look a certain way that people would not discover that he's really a Torah giant, so he could be left in peace and he could learn Torah. And every time he would come to shul, on the way to the shul, the kids would take mud and throw it at him. The adults would throw mud at him. They would curse him, yell at him, crazy person. And it continuously abused this person. Not that it's allowed for anybody, needless to say, Talmid Chacham, but this was something that went on for years. One day, the Gabbai of the Beit Knesset was a Talmid Chacham. And each night, he would, after everybody left the synagogue, he would shut the doors, lock everything so nobody bothers him, shut the lights, leave himself a candle, and learn Torah the whole night. One night, as he's trying to learn, he sees himself falling asleep suddenly. He's falling asleep every few minutes. He's falling asleep. He doesn't know why he's falling asleep, but he keeps falling asleep. There's rain outside, scary storm. And he is as tired as can be, but nothing unusual about this night, otherwise. All of a sudden he falls asleep, and he gets tapped on the back. Immediately jumps, whoa, how'd you come in? Who are you? And he sees this tall man, really tall, beautiful, handsome man, standing right next to him. And something he's never seen before. Someone that very honorable, long white beard, beautiful man, something majestic, and he has no idea what this is. Well, he's dumbfounded. Who are you? Well, how did you come in here? And the man says to him, is this where the holy Maharal lives? He says, who? Rabbi Shmuel Eagles. Is this where the Gadol Ador, the giant, lives? Rabbi Shmuel Eagles, the Gabbai says. Rabbi Shmuel, we have a Shmulik Eagles. Shmulik, you mean? Why do you call him Rabbi? He's not a rabbi. Where does he live? He lives down the street in that little hole in the wall over there, tiny house. What do you want with Shmulik? The big man starts walking towards the door. The Gabbai opens the door for him, sees the door was locked. How did this guy come in? Doesn't know. He leaves. He goes back to his learning. Of course, this time he doesn't fall back asleep. And he tries to learn. Till morning. The next night, again, it's rain, thunder. He locks the doors. 2 locks this time. Doesn't want anybody to walk in on him, scare him like last night. And goes to his table, candle, starts learning, and falls asleep. Tries to get up, and again falls asleep. Tries to get up again, and falls asleep. And he cannot get a word of Gemara in, he can't get anything in. All of a sudden, as he's deep into sleep, somebody taps him on the back. Immediately, who are you? How'd you get in here? Who are you? And he sees this beautiful man, red hair. Well, how'd you come in here? Where are you coming from? Who are you? And this man tells him, is this where the Gadol Ador lives? The Marsha? Who? Rabbi Shmuel Idol is the Gadol Ador. Is this where he lives? He says, you too? You want Shmulik? What's with you guys in Shmulik? Why do you guys keep coming for Shmulik? And anyway, how did you get in? Where does he live? He lives in that tiny little hut over there. Why do you guys want Shmulik? Okay, just go. He's upset of getting scared and he lets him out. He has no idea who these people are. And what do they want with Shmulik? The third night, he already changed the locks and he wants no one to come in and he's trying to figure out how do these people come in and what do they want with this Shmulik? That night, tries to study, falls asleep. And again, he gets tapped, and immediately before he even sees who it is, he grabs him, he goes, who are you and how do you keep coming into the shul? Only to open his eyes and see two blue eyes piercing right at him. Someone that's angel but not man. Something out of this world. And immediately he sits down and says, who are you? And how do you keep coming in? And the man tells him, I am Eliyahu Navi. So that's how I get in. The people that came here before, the first night, was Shaul HaMelech. The second night was David HaMelech. Shaul was known to be big and beautiful. And David was known to have red hair. They had a machloket in Shemayim. They're learning Torah. And they had a debate among them. And in Shemayim, they got to a point where they couldn't get to the bottom line. So how do we get to the bottom line? They decreed in Shemayim, only the Maharal can give you guys the final answer. The Maharal, the Gadol Ador, that lives right next to you, that you guys mock, that you guys throw mud at, they call him Shoteh, he's the Gadol Ador. David HaMelech and Shaul went to him over the last couple of nights to learn Torah with them all night, to get to the bottom line of what's the solution for their machloket. And I'm here to join them. Now, I'm telling you this because the Maharal does not want the world to be this, to know who he is. He wants to learn Torah in peace. But you ask, so I tell you. And if you disclose this to anybody, on that day you will die. The Gabbai was dumbfounded. He didn't go back to sleep. As he studied throughout the night and tried to figure out what just happened, morning came, he opens the door to the synagogue, and who does he see? But Shmulik, the Maharal, Rabbi Shmuel Idels, the Gadol Ador, and the kids are throwing mud at him. The kids are making fun of him. The adults are making fun of him. He simply couldn't take it. He says to the people, there's a meeting. Come before the tefillah, town meeting at the shul. Everybody has to come. Everyone comes. And he says to them, I have an announcement to make. Everything that happened to me over the last few days, it has to be said because all of us are sinning in a magnitude of a sin that who knows if it's forgivable. We have the Gadol Ador that's so big that David HaMelech and Shaul HaMelech and Eliyahu Navi come to his house to learn Torah with him. And instead of honoring him, instead of having him as the rabbi of the entire city, we are throwing mud at him. And he tells them the details of what happened and what he saw. And he says, the proof for everything that I said is that as soon as I stop talking, I'm going to die in front of you. And that's exactly what happened. He stopped talking, and he died on the spot in front of everybody. Surely the whole community went to the Maharal. In the beginning, the Maharal continued playing along. No, what are you talking about? And he saw that they knew exactly what happened and how David HaMelech came to him and Shaul HaMelech came to him. And he accepted the position of becoming the head rabbi. But from here we see that when somebody puts themselves in a position of leadership, if they're a real leader, if they're a real chacham, they're not putting themselves in that position out of desire for honor, desire to get money, but quite the opposite. The desire of the chachamim is typically to be left alone, so they can learn more Torah, they can acquire more wisdom, and connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu even deeper. When someone becomes a leader of a community, needless to say, a leader of a bigger than just a community, one of the Gedolei Ador, it's not for desire, but simply an outcome that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is putting them in that position. To help people, it's a sacrifice for them. This is the reason why you hear how specific and precise the schedule was of the Gedolei Ador, whether it was Rav Ovadia, Rav Elyashiv, the Rav Kanievsky, all tzaddikim, kedoshim, and the rest of them. Each had a very specific schedule and made sure that they're not wasting time. So when these tzaddikim paskin something, when they say an halacha, when they say this is good or this is not good, do this or don't do this, it's not like a regular person saying do this or don't do this. So when people discount it, discredit it, if they're ignoramuses, they don't know anything, the Chafetz Chaim was lenient on them and says, listen, this is like they're spiritually sick. You can't expect them to make the right decision. They haven't made the right decision on their own life. You want them to make the right decision on what the rabbi is saying. They don't know what wisdom is if it hit them in the face. But when it's people that do have some wisdom, they did learn somewhat, or perhaps even more, and they not only discredit the big rabbi, the big tzaddikim, the Da'at Torah, but they discredit it in a forbidden manner by saying that this tzaddik, this chacham, he's great, but we don't need to listen to him. Why? He has a bias. He has an agenda. And this, Rabotai Yekarim, is what the Chazon Ish says horrible statement on right now. Horrible statement on something that perhaps is the scariest statement we've heard from this sefer so far. He says that these people that say that the rabbi has a vested interest, and they put a word of cynicism to sweep aside 100 rebukes, and the people end up being considered as actual idol worshippers, all by innocently, but yet they construct their own eternal truth from a false concept. He says these people that call the truth biased are considered as if they are idol worshippers, nothing less, says the Chazon Ish. So while he was very lenient when it came to the ignoramuses, not because he's trying to be lenient, but simply because they're already spiritually sick with their ignorance, when it comes to people that consider themselves frum, consider themselves knowledgeable, they read a few sfarim, they went to yeshiva and so on, and they are acting in a similar manner, he says these people are much, much worse than the first ones. They're considered idol worshippers, Hashem Yishmo. And all this, the Chazon Ish says, all this is a result of not having based their morals on halacha. Meaning they learned halacha, but they didn't learn enough MUSSAR. They learned MUSSAR, but not enough halacha. Meaning the two were not interconnected. Where they don't realize, the Chazon Ish says, that the halachic authorities may judge for themselves. And this we can see And what it says in the Gemara about Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, or Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Elisha, the same ones that we keep bringing up, the Dayanim that recuse themselves. He says, when it comes to those very same Dayanim, that they're using as an example of, if they have a bias, and they're tzaddikim, surely the tzaddik of this generation also has a bias. He's only human, he's not better than them. He says, but if they learned further, they would see that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Elisha, themselves ended up choosing the judges who were to take their places at the aforementioned trials. Meaning that although they recused themselves from being the judges in those particular cases, that did not mean that they just walked away. They actually put the new judges in their place. And he says that a person that has the logic of these other people would think that personal interest that prevented them from sitting in judgment themselves would also preclude their choosing the judge. For it's known that many times the litigant cannot agree on who is to judge the case. In the actual choosing of a judge, there may be something of a favoring one litigant and not the other. And it's proper for someone who has personal interest in the matter to distance himself from choosing a judge. But these halachic authorities learned from this that personal interest is not a reason to avoid choosing a judges. As it says in Shulchan Aruch, the Rama says in Choshen Mishpat 767. He says that although these judges recuse themselves because of their own personal interest, that does not mean that they are not allowed to choose the judge. Because even though the someone that has a real personal interest, a real personal bias, you would think he shouldn't even pick the judge, because the judge could favor him over him, or her over him, or vice versa. So if he's biased to recuse himself, surely that means he's biased according to all things. No. He is recusing himself because he's biased because of what he knows can actually hurt him as far as like the way he views things. Not biased because he's a wicked person that's going to manipulate the Torah in order to serve his own purposes. Meaning that him recusing himself is out of righteousness, not out of him getting kicked out. And therefore his legitimate opinion is still valid when it comes to putting a good judge, because he's still looking for the best interest of the people. He recused himself because he wants their best interest, and therefore he can still serve as the one that chooses the judge because he still wants their best interest. Not just that one person, but both parties. And he only recused himself because of his righteousness, not because you caught him because he has a bias like the average person does. So from there, that's what the Shulchan Aruch paskins, that although the person's personal interest may forbid him from being a judge in a particular case, it's not forbidding him from choosing a judge. And he says even more so, the leading sage of the generation, if you're referring to one of the Gedolei Ador, the very same Gedolei Ador that the community of ignorance was making fun of and said, you know what, we don't need to listen to him because he doesn't know our community, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Then the Chazon Ish says they're spiritually sick. It's a sin, but even though it's intentional sin, it'll be counted as a accidental sin because they're literally clueless. But those people that are actually frum and they're religious and they know and they learned, and some of them are even rabbis or avrechim, and they're treating the Gedolei Ador in the same fashion, where they're saying, listen, he's a tzaddik, this Gedolei Ador, and what he wrote is good, but he only wrote it because it benefits his son-in-law. He only wrote it because it benefits his sister. He only wrote it because it benefits him. Like when Rabbi Ovadia spoke against wigs, and many times he spoke against wigs, wrote against it, and one of the times that he spoke against it, he says, what do you guys think? I have a hat store or something that I benefit out of people not wearing wigs? I'm simply teaching you not to wear wigs because there's over 100 poskim that said it's forbidden throughout all the generations, Ashkenazim, Hasidim, Litaim, Sfaradim, across the board. All the way from Yonatan ben Uziel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, countless poskim have said throughout all the generations that it's forbidden to wear wigs. He says, I'm not telling you not to wear wigs because I have some hat store that if people don't wear wigs, they're going to buy my hats. I don't have any agenda here. So now when the people are supposed to know better, because they went to yeshiva and they learned a few things, but they say, you know why? You know why he says don't wear wigs? Because he's Sephardi. You know why he said MUSSAR, fire and brimstone? Because he's a Baal Tshuva. You know why he says that this KIRUV doesn't count? Because of this. You know why he said this kosher is not good? Because of this. They create a bias. This is the worst possible thing that a person can do, so much so, the Chazon Ish says that they have turned their Torah into idol worship, because they created a new eternal truth. And he says that for them to say that their example, their proof is that just like Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Yossi had a bias, surely he is a bias. He says, no. If he is one of the great sages of the generation, he cannot be disqualified from deciding on the matter of appointing of a rabbi or a leader because of any personal interest. Because this is part of his duties as an halachic authority. And people who question the integrity of a chacham transgress severely by saying that they have not sinned at all, while they are destroying the foundation of the Torah. He says that these people, they're saying, no, he has a personal interest. He says this is such a great sin, but it's multiple layers of punishment. Why is there multiple layers of punishment? Number one, you're doubting the Torah. You're doubting Talmidei Chachamim. But you're not doubting it because you have a great sage that's supporting you. You simply turn yourself into the sage. And you're actually questioning the integrity of a Chacham. But even more so, he says, that the prophet Jeremiah says that Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I punish you even more so because you said I didn't sin. You say I didn't sin. So he says they're transgressing severely by saying they have not sinned. Meaning it's not only what they did is bad, but they're also claiming innocence. That in itself, the Chazon Ish says, the very same Chazon Ish that is very lenient on a secular, clueless person, or not necessarily secular, but the clueless person that is not a Talmid Chacham, he's lenient on him, says he's spiritually sick. Let's hope that Hashem has mercy on him. He's not having the same mercy on people that are supposed to know better. He says these people are claiming they have not sinned. That in itself is a sin. Because what they're saying they haven't sinned while actually making the ultimate sin of destroying the foundation of Torah. And naturally, they come up with personal interests that have never occurred to the Chacham himself. And an unintentional sin that results from the lack of proper learning is like an intentional one. He says, these people, they're disregarding the Chacham not because they have the truth, but they've created a new truth and they've simply disparaged anybody that listens to the truth of the Chacham because it doesn't fit their agenda. But since they know you can't just say don't listen to him, so what do? They say, no, he only said that because he has a personal interest. And thereby destroying the foundation of the Torah. And how do they do it? By creating all types of personal interests that are his biases that this Chacham never even thought about. Oh yeah, he's only saying that because he makes money out of it. The Chacham has never even thought that there's a way to make money out of what he says. Oh, he's only there because ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. The Chacham never even knew that what they're thinking is even a possibility. In essence, they're blaming him and saying he's biased and thereby you shouldn't listen to him because of things that they themselves would do. And he says, because of that, even if what they're doing is an unintentional sin, it's considered as if it's an intentional one. Why? They do learn, and their lack of learning properly, where they learned more halacha but not enough mussar, or they learned a lot of mussar but not enough halacha, meaning they were supposed to know. They were, in essence, considered the ones that know, and they still made this mistake. He judges them very heavily. Where he says their unintentional sin is like an intentional one, meaning the exact opposite side of the spectrum from those ignoramuses. Now, the person would say, wait a minute, so it's better off being an ignoramus. No, it's not better off being an ignoramus. Why? Because the ignoramus most likely has no share of the world to come. Person doesn't learn Torah every single day. Maharal says has no share of the world to come. So for him, in the meantime, we were more lenient in judging him because he's already bringing enough judgment on himself. So it's not better off to be an ignoramus. It's better off to be a chacham, but also a chacham that knows where he stands. Where he stands. Where do I stand? Am I allowed to speak? Not allowed to speak. Am I allowed to have my opinion? Not allowed to have my opinion. And this is one of the things that's very difficult for people. Very difficult. Why? Their ego is in the way. He has an opinion. I want to be heard. He thinks that this is like politics or sports. That his opinion counts. As if it counts in those things either. And unfortunately, Rabotai, when a person values their own opinion a little bit too much, they're bound to fail miserably. Now a person can say, wait a minute, but the people of previous generation, that made a mistake at the time of Shabtai Tzvi and Rabbi Yaron Reuven, maybe they were all not wicked, maybe some of them were good. Yes, the ones that were good were not judged in the same way as the ones that were good, the ones that weren't good. In fact, Rabbi Yaron in Uchot Mesaprot, one of the dibukim that he dealt with was the neshama of Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi was wicked person that didn't start off wicked. He knew a lot of Torah, he knew a lot of things, so much so that even when Rabbi Yaron was communicating with him, he asked him questions about complicated issues regarding what the Chachamim says, and Shabtai Tzvi says, no, what do you want me to get burned by the words of the sages by going against them? I'm already getting punished enough as a dibuk, in Kafakela. And in that section of Minchat Yehuda, page 299, there's an interesting story that's within the story of the Shabtai Tzvi section, that Rabbi Yaron says that when Shabtai Tzvi initially was talking through the person, but through his heart, meaning that there's a couple of different ways that these dibukim communicate with someone that knows how to communicate with them. One of the ways is the well-known, where there's a voice coming out of the person, Shem Yishmo. Another way is that they're saying something that only the person that has this dibuk in them, only he can hear it. Now, of course, if someone's a serious mikubal and so on, they know whether it's true or not and so on. But the question is why this and why that, why there's a difference. And Rabbi Yaron explains it. Because he asked Shabtai Tzvi, Shem Reshai Nirkav, he asked him, how come you're speaking through his heart? Why don't you speak through the throat so I could hear? And Shabtai Tzvi made something up. He goes, no, because of this and that. And Rabbi Yaron says, no, he lied to me. He lied to me. Why? He said he can't speak through the throat because this guy that he's in learns Torah. And the Torah doesn't allow him to speak through his throat. He was a liar. He says, although the Torah protects a person from the evil inclination, it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with causing a dibuk, a spirit that's within a person, to not be able to speak through them. No, it has nothing to do with it. He goes, and how do I know? This is the best part. How does Rabbi Yaron know this? Is this in a book? He goes, no. I learned this from experience. He goes, there was a dibuk that came into a young lady that came to me in 1915, 5675. A 35-year-old maiden who was blind in both eyes that came to see me. And saying that a chacham who lived in my lifetime, who I knew and recognized and died, he has entered her, he has reincarnated in her. And although she was blind and did not study Torah, he spoke within her. He spoke within her heart, but not through her mouth. So the exact opposite of what Shabtai Tzvi says. He says, by the way, in regards to that particular dibuk, during his lifetime, this chacham was questionable. He had a questionable reputation. It was said that he was trying to seduce women. And he was doing that with this maiden. He seduced some maiden to behave promiscuously with another chacham in him, and he told her that the Mashiach would be born from their union, but she didn't listen to him. And after and that's what he was trying to do to this woman. He was the woman that he entered. He tried to convince her to go do something with her body with somebody else, saying that the Mashiach will come from her. This righteous woman didn't listen to him. She came to Rabbi Yaron who removed this person. He says, but by the way, this particular person was a fake chacham. How do we know it was a fake chacham aside from this particular action? When we buried him, we noticed that he had a tattoo of a cross on his heart. Meaning, in reality, he was a Christian. Christian, like one of these missionaries that pretends to be a Jew. He lives in a community. He says that he's a rabbi. He learns Hebrew. He learns a few psukim here and there just to missionize and pretend that he's really Jewish. In reality, he's a Christian. And by the way, you'll notice, anyone that reads about the subject, the issues of Tumah, Tara, Dibukim, all these different things, you'll notice that in countless places when it discusses the ultimate Tumah, ultimate impurity and so on, it's always Christianity. Why? Because the full force of the Tumah was given to Christianity, in so many words. All of the impurity of the world is in the hands of Christianity, much more than anything else, much more than even those crazy people in India that eat people. They have even less Tumah than Christianity because of the nature of how it started and who and what and when, which, by the way, as a side note, one of the things that you'll notice that is relevant to our subject when people don't want to listen to Chachamim is when people don't understand the weight of the words of the Chacham versus the weight of the words of some average scholar, needless to say, a non-Jewish scholar. And one of the places that this comes up very often is when it comes to the subject of history. Many times people, and I've even had Bachurei Yeshiva come to me and say, listen, I don't understand. These Muslim or Christian or whatever other scholars are saying that the Torah has mistakes in it and that these things didn't happen there or the sages were wrong. And for whatever reason or another, the Yetzirah enters these people in such a fashion that even if they learned some Torah and they went to yeshiva, it's much easier for them to believe the very same nations that have murdered their grandparents than it is for them to believe they're the sages of the generation and the previous generation that literally saved Judaism. It's unbelievable, but nonetheless, that's how hard the Yetzirah comes into certain people's hearts. And I've seen this with my own eyes, where they'll believe some impure person that they see on some television network, telling them that that the Torah is wrong or that the sages are wrong, and let's say, for example, that Yeshua ben Parachia, who's mentioned in Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, Mishnah number 6, that he was the rabbi of Yeshu. He was the rabbi of Yeshu HaNotzri, Imach Shemo v'Zichro. And the Christian missionaries and their so-called scholars and historians said, nah, this is wrong. What are you talking about? This Yeshua ben Parachia was 140 years before Yeshu was even in the world. Clearly, this is not the same Yeshu. It was just a common name and so on. And unfortunately, there are many Jews, even learned ones, that fall for this trap. And they simply, by default, believe the Christians and the historians and the missionaries, completely forgetting that they've lied about everything else they've ever said. Forgetting that they're liars about everything. Forgetting that they're idol worshippers. Forgetting that you cannot consider them valid witnesses. But for this, we're going to believe them. And how? They'll say, no, listen, if there's wisdom among the Goyim, you're allowed to believe them. Yeah, but what about the Chachamim that said otherwise? You just discount it with Chachamim. Oh, maybe the Chachamim and the Jews are wrong. This is how bizarre it is. So you're saying that the wisdom of those same idol worshippers, that you believe, but the wisdom of the sages, the holy sages that have no benefit in it, that you could just discount because it's human nature not to believe them. It's human nature for them to make mistakes. This is one of the dumb things that unfortunately enters a person's mind at times, where the Yetzer Hara, he doesn't ask you to go and believe the heresy right away. He simply plants a seed. He plants a seed. Oh, there's a mistake here, and there's another mistake. He makes you believe there's mistakes. Rav Ovadia alav shalom, no one that ever learned any of his Torah can ever say he's like a regular person. Needless to say, he makes mistakes. Rav Ovadia, the tens of thousands of books that were next to him, he knew by heart. He brought many books into the world that when he went to Egypt, and he was there for some years before he left, there were many books over there that weren't found around the rest of the world. They weren't in the world. And he wasn't allowed to take them, but he remembered all of them by heart. Literally, he would take each book, he would look at it at a museum or wherever it was, come home, write down the whole page of what he remembered off the top of his head. Or 2 pages, or 10 pages, and so on. Little by little, he would literally write entire books that were published 500 years before. The wealth of knowledge that he had was purely something out of this world. It's not a normal thing like intellect or high IQ. So Rav Ovadia, he writes in his Anaf Etz Avot, highly recommended, by the way, highly recommended commentary on Pirkei Avot. This Anaf Etz Avot, he says in Mishnah, in the section of the 6th Mishnah in Perik Aleph, he says that the whole story of Yeshua ben Parachia, with him kicking out the wicked student that he had, Yeshua Nutzri. And he says here that the Ravad in Sefer HaKabbalah, on page 53, writes that based on the Talmud, Jewish historians maintain that Yeshu, mentioned in this account, is the student of Yeshua ben Parachia, which is Jesus of Nazareth, the founder of Christianity, and that he lived in the times of King Yanai. However, non-Jewish historians claim that Jesus was born during the reign of Herod the Great and was hanged during the reign of his son, Herod Archelaus. The discrepancy between the two views is great, more than 100 years separating between them. Nonetheless, our tradition is true. Meaning, all of those documentaries and even rabbis and whoever is saying that the Christian historians, the non-Jewish historians that say that Jesus lived at a different time, simple, they're wrong. Yeah, what about what they said? Who cares what they said? No nation on planet Earth has a more precise history than we do. More documented history than we do. So the question is, why would they change the time? Why do they have such a interest to change the time slot of when Jesus was born? What difference does it make to them? He's dead anyway. Like 100 years here, 100 years there. What's the difference? Nobody that wrote the New Testament actually saw Jesus anyway. So what's the difference if he lived there or he lived there? The Sefer HaEshkol, page 18, that Rav Ovadia brings, says that Jesus was hanged 135 years before the destruction of the Second Temple. And Abarbanel places the year of his execution at 151 years before the destruction, meaning you're talking about a minor difference of 15 years. We're not talking about the big difference like the difference between the Christians and the Jews. Minor difference. In contrast, the Christians maintain that he died only 42 years before the temple's destruction. Why? This is because the Christians claim that the temple's destruction was a punishment for Jesus' execution. Here we see why there is such an interest by the church, by the missionaries, to pinpoint the time of when Jesus lived, contrary to the only history that he's actually documented in. Meaning, if you look at the lifetime of Jesus, any books that were written during his lifetime, no one mentions him, except the Jewish people mentioning him in the Talmud. And of course, not mentioning him in a favorable way. They're saying that he's in boiling feces, they tell his story, and I've showed you guys in other shiurim of how the Talmud was censored by the church, and there's certain parts of the Talmud that were taken out. We still have them, Baruch Hashem, but for many years, there are certain parts of Masechet Pesachim, Masechet Avodah Zarah, and many others that were censored, the name was changed, or literally entire sections of the Talmud were removed in order to remove the story of what happened with Jesus because of they were simply killing us for having the truth exposed on him. But the point is that one of the arguments that they had for many years that's apparently pertinent in this generation is that perhaps it's not the same Jesus. Perhaps there are other people named Jesus or Yeshu. That's the argument. Rabbi Ovadia says, no. We have a tradition, we have a Masoret, we have proof from the Abarbanel, from the Ravad, and from other Chachamim that this is the Rabbi, this is him, this is everything. He is the Rashad that went against his Rabbi, Yeshua ben Parachia. It's 150 years before the destruction of the temple, not 40 years. And the reason why they're trying to push a different year is because it serves their agenda. And if you're a Jew that believes this, it's not because you think that perhaps the Christian scholars are smarter. You may be, but usually it's because you don't have enough faith in our sages. Usually you don't have enough knowledge of the greatness of our sages. Sometimes it's because you think that the sages that we have, perhaps they make mistakes, like everybody else makes mistakes. How come you don't have the same calculation on the Christians that literally lie every single words that come out of their mouth in their book in the New Testament? How come? So here, this is one of the things that Rav Ovadia brings, and is enough. It's avot. So the beautiful thing is that you have other places that he brings, that talk about, that confirm the history, that confirm the timing. The point being is, Rabotai, is that having emunat chachamim is not just pertaining to, which means faith in our sages, is not just pertaining to do this or don't do this. Start Shabbat at a certain time and end Shabbat at a different time. It's not just when it comes to rulings. It also comes to time when it comes to specific teachings that may be pertaining to you or your child or somebody that you want to marry or different things. When a person has simply blindfolds that he puts on himself, she puts on themselves, that the second the Chacham speaks, that's it. I don't care about anybody else's opinion. He says it, it's like Mount Sinai. That's it. He said it, that's it. It's the end. End of discussion. End of nothing. Yeah, but what about my opinion? There is no my opinion. The Chacham said it, that is a Kadosh Baruch Hu's opinion. Now, if a person is having a hard time accepting that, they're going to have a hard time accepting a lot of things in their life. And end up becoming little by little more and more problematic depending on how much out of control they allow themselves. When a person thinks that their opinion is literally no less valid than some of the greatest sages of their time or even their own rabbi, that person is unfortunately just going to go downhill more and more and more. And even when they ask questions, they don't have the respect of who's answering. So typically what they'll do is they'll ask a question, but they'll ask it to 3-4 different rabbis, 3-4 different scholars. Why? Because simply, they don't really believe that any one particular one of them knows for sure, so they figure that they themselves have the wherewithal to pick the right answer out of everybody else's information. Meaning that their arrogance is so great that they don't believe that any one of the chachamim that they're going to ask, any one of the rabbis they ask, really knows the truth, but they know, even though they don't know anything, they know how to decipher the truth better than everybody else. And it literally gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse by the second. And a person like this, it's unfortunately tragic that it's all due to a simple problem that they could fix. Learning MUSSAR and Halacha, not just one or the other. Learning MUSSAR and Halacha, not just one or the other. And learning them in together and not thinking that, oh, I know better, I don't need it, or anything like that. There's a reason why the people have questions, and typically those questions are due to a lack of study. When a person has questions about halacha, it's usually because he didn't study halacha. When a person has a question about what to do in certain things, it's usually because they haven't studied enough MUSSAR. But what about when a person has a question in regards to the validity of the Torah? That's not a lack of study or a lack of MUSSAR. That's a lack of belief. A lack of belief in the foundation of the Torah, such as the fact that we got everything we have at Mount Sinai. Now, many people will say, no, we got some stuff at Mount Sinai, but the rest, this, that. So this is heretical beliefs. And to this week's parashat Behar, we're in the exile, in the diaspora, we're reading Parashat Behar. It actually is one of the sources that shows how the Torah, both the written and the oral, were given at Mount Sinai in a simple commentary on the word Behar. Behar Sinai. Now, the average person that reads Vayidaber Adonai Moshe Behar Sinai Le'emor, the first verse of the parasha says, Hashem spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, saying, the average person will say, okay, they were Mount Sinai. What's the big deal? If the person is wise, says, oh, wait a minute. Why does it say Behar Sinai? Of course he's at Mount Sinai. He's not Mount Everest. He's not Mount Ararat, where the Teva of Noach is. Why is it Behar Sinai? So the Chachamim gave us the answer. Why is the Kadosh Baruch Hu, after we already have half the book already, half the Torah is already discussing that we're at Mount Sinai, that we've been there, we haven't left, why? Why is it mentioned in Mount Sinai again? Because it wants to teach us. Everything you're going to learn after this, about the Shemitah, about the promise that the Kadosh Baruch Hu has, that if you keep the Shemitah on the 6th year, He's going to bless you with enough parnasah for 3 years. Something that a human being cannot promise. Different rules of how to keep the Shemitah. Different things that are part of the oral Torah. All of this, the emunah, the bitachon, the rules, the oral Torah, everything was given to Mount Sinai. Everything. That's why he says he spoke to Moshe at Mount Sinai. Because everything was at Mount Sinai. Not just part of it. Everything was at Mount Sinai. Everything. So this is one simple place. Now, of course, a person that does not want to believe the words of the sage will say, now, this is a manipulation. They're saying it after the fact. They're saying this. Okay, so a person like that, you simply cannot help. You cannot help. A person that does not want to believe the truth when it's staring him in the face, you can't help them. Because this is a person that simply does not want to help himself, because helping himself would mean that he would have to change. But if a person is willing to accept the truth, willing to accept the Torah, willing to accept the MUSSAR, willing to accept the necessity to change their behavior, that person you can help. You can help. Don't look for fights, look to help. Look to help. If you find yourself constantly in the middle of confusions, it's typically because you're busy with things that are not learning Torah. If you're constantly confused, it means you're not learning enough Torah. So it's important for all of us to do KIRUV, to help people and do chesed, to protest against bad things. It's important to do a lot of things. But top of the top, most important thing is to learn Torah. Because without learning Torah, everything else goes into the garbage. The KIRUV that you will do will not work. The chesed that you will do will end up hurting people. The protest will end up being to serve your own self-ego. So it's critical that a person know that if your foundation of everything that you're doing is learning Torah, you can build on it. If the foundation is not learning Torah, you just simply want to do other things, you can easily fall into the same trap that some of these people fell into, and instead of being a human, you'll end up having to be reincarnated as a cat, chas v'shalom, or something like that. And this is not the goal. This is not the goal of the shulim. This is not the goal of what learning Torah for. Learning Torah is to help ourselves get closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to serve Him, but at the same token, to help others as well serve Him. For that, Rabotai Karim, we have to stay very, very glued and narrow focused into what Da'at Torah is, and not necessarily our own opinions. Be'ezrat Hashem, this too will give us the chizuk that we need to get closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we hear the words of the sages, when we hear the words of the Chachamim, we will obey simply because they said it, even if we don't understand it. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'Amen.